Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Michelle Graff, and I'm the editor in chief at National Jeweler. Pleased to welcome you to the latest episode of My Next Question, National Jeweler's webinar series sponsored by RDI Diamonds. Today's session is hosted by our senior editor, Gemstones, Brecken Brandstrader, and features Jewelmer's Jacques-Christophe Branilek. Before I turn it over to Brecken and Jacques-Christophe to get started, I just want to let our attendees know that if they have a question, they can type it into the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom of their screens. I will be back on at the end of the discussion to facilitate the Q&A. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on the National Jeweler website this coming Friday, May 21st. Now I'll turn it over to Brecken and her guests to get things started. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that introduction. Thank you to everyone for tuning into today's session. And a huge thank you, of course, to Jacques-Christophe, who so kindly agreed to hop on at 9 p.m. his time. I'm so excited to be here to talk pearls with you guys today. Before we get more into the intricacies of the cultured pearl farming process and Jewelmer, I wanted to start a little bit by looking at the history of the company. So Jacques-Christophe, if you could talk us a little bit through how the family business began and grew, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Brecken, and thanks for having me join you guys today. It's really a pleasure and an honor. So to give you some background on Jewelmer, the company was established in 1979 by my father and Mr. Manuel Coanco. You see them here in the images when they were a lot younger on the left and then currently on the right. And basically, my father, he started as a commercial pilot in Tahiti, where he worked together with the Tahitians to pioneer the black Tahitian, well, the black pearl, basically. And from there, he then continued on his journey, sailing around the world until he found the golden South Sea pearl here in the Philippines. And that's where he met his partner, Mr. Manuel Coanco, who at the time was in a coconut hybridization project in the southern part of Palawan, which is an archipelago in the Philippines. And they embarked on this journey and this dream, rather, to be able to produce cultured South Sea pearls. So I guess moving forward, Jewelmer became known as the pioneer of the golden South Sea, as we were the first ones to be able to harvest them in a commercial quantity. But from the very beginning, Jewelmer has always been fully vertically integrated as well. So not only involved in the pearl farming aspect, but as well as the international distribution of the loose pearls, but also in the design and manufacture of the jewelry, as well as retail. Today, we have over 15 stores here in the Philippines, and the brand can be found in about 15 different countries internationally. And in the US, with our partner actually having a flagship store, Glen Espig, on Worth Avenue in Palm Beach, which we just launched, I believe it was 2 years ago, that we're very proud about. So yeah, in the last picture, sorry, I went a little bit ahead. It's a story that now spans generations. So I'm second generation together with my two sisters that you see here in the photos. So Gael Branilek, who's our Senior Vice President and Creative Director. So she's in charge of the whole jewelry design and manufacturing arm. And my sister Marian, who's in charge of the marketing department. So it's really truly a family business.
Yeah, that's great. So like we said, Jewelmer breeds oysters that create the South Sea golden pearls, which are just gorgeous, at farms in the Philippines, correct? So for those who might not know how that works, can you give us a little bit of a walkthrough of what that includes, that process?
Absolutely. I can give you a crash course. So basically, the process that we've developed is a non-extractive process. So first of all, the pearl is a living gem. It comes from a living organism. I think it's one of the few gems that comes from a living organism. And this organism is called the Pinctada maxima oyster. And we breed specifically for the gold lip Pinctada maxima. Now, this is a process like any farming that has to be done in harmony with nature. And therefore, we're working in some of the most pristine marine environments in the world. So to give you a little bit more information about this oyster, It's actually it's called the queen of gems, gem of queens. It's the largest pearl producing oyster. The pearl size typically can be from 9 millimeter. 24 is extremely rare. I would say 9 to 18 millimeters. And the process is about one pearl per oyster. Then you also have the nacre thickness, which should be expected from South Sea of 2 to 6 millimeters. And so this cultivation period that you see here on the slide, that's from grafting process to the harvest. But actually the process starts before that in the hatchery. So for those of you who don't know what a hatchery is, basically that's a kind of a laboratory where we breed the Pinctada maxima oyster. And that's why we call it non-extractive, because we are not taking these oysters from the wild. We're actually breeding them ourselves, growing them, and then actually adding them to the natural or wild population. So from this point where they are microscopic, the oysters, we have to grow them for about 2 to 3 years, which you'll see here in the next slide. Yeah, so there you go. That's a baby oyster that's about, I would say, 4 months old. So we grow them out through about 2 to 3 years, and then that's when they'll be ready for what we call the first operation or the first graft. So in the next slide here, you'll see that's when a trained pearl technician, who's very similar to an eye surgeon, actually works in a very confined space with very precise and is able to insert in the reproductive organ of the oyster a nucleus together with a live mantle tissue, which hopefully will then start to create a pearl sac and therefore create a pearl. So there's no guarantees in this process, and it takes a long time, just like any doctor, to be able to master this technique. And because they are living organisms, it's not like clockwork that that you can do on one organism exactly the same operation as the other one, because they all are a little different, just like us, right? So yeah, that's a very challenging technique to learn. So from this stage, they go into post-operation, which is about 2 years, where we put them back in the water, and we pretty much leave them to enjoy themselves, I guess, and make sure that they are in areas of the farm where there's good water flow, good plankton availability as much as possible, and we regulate the depth of the nets to make sure that they're at the right water table or water temperature, which has become more challenging these days with climate change and global warming. So after these 2 to 3 years, we're now up to 5 years, and that's when it's the magical moment where we harvest the pearl. So the pearl harvest, some people think that we break the oysters open and take out the pearl, but it's actually not like that at all. It's very similar to, I guess, cesarean, where we actually very carefully make an incision to be able to let the oyster give birth to this pearl. So it's really a magical moment. We have no idea what's going to come out. The uniqueness is that even though we are aiming for golden pearls, only 30% of the harvest will be dark champagne or golden, and some shells might not even have any pearls. So we don't control the size, the shape, the color a little bit, the skin purity. A lot of it is up to nature. That's why I say, when people ask how much of the process do we control, I would say we control at most 49%, but it's joint venture with nature, and she still has the majorities. And so at the end of the day, it's her call.
Right.
So I guess in a nutshell, we've gone from the birth of the oyster to the harvest of the pearl. So I hope I was able to summarize it well for our audience out there.
Yes, that was fantastic. Thank you. And so going back and looking at it overall, how long does that process take? And then what's the average size of the pearl that results?
So that process, it's one pearl per oyster, and pretty much the process composes about 377 steps. So 377 times, one of our pearl divers comes in contact with the oyster, and 5 years for just one pearl. And I would say the average size of our harvest today is smaller than it used to be. It's probably between 10.5 to 11 millimeters.
Okay. And I see on this slide it says that this particular strand took 37 years to complete. Is that pretty standard for something like that?
No, actually, we've only been able to ever complete one strand like this.
Oh, wow.
This Palawan strand, and this is really a national heritage for the Philippines. I mean, the pearl, first of all, being our national gem, but the fact that we were able to complete this is a rare 16 to 18 millimeter, almost double length strand that is flawless, top gem. And we had started collecting pearls 37 years back to complete this one strand. And actually, we some of our best strands can be found in our store in Palm Beach. So if anybody's in the area, I really invite them to take a look because the collection's quite amazing.
Yeah, it's just beautiful. So now let's look at how the process that you just walked us through, particularly for golden South Sea pearls, how that might differ from other cultured pearls.
Right. So first of all, I think it's important to understand the nature of the color. So the golden color that comes from the oyster is actually a recessive gene. It's not something that shows itself, I guess, without proper breeding. So as much as possible, we try to breed to get the color, but it's really a quest for perfection that's rarely achieved. So even if the oyster has the genetic predisposition to be able to produce golden pearls, there has to be certain environmental factors that are present in order for the oyster to manifest the color. So conditions such as food availability, the right temperature, no stress. So basically, it's extremely difficult as a farmer because you have to control these variables, which you have very little control over, in order for the oyster to even make this gold color. So the only thing we can really control is what we call our TLC, or tender loving care, and that's really describes that the handle, the way we handle, or the way we care for the oysters, for her to be able to feel nice and produce this gold color, I guess.
Right.
So you see some statistics here, just to give you an idea of the rarity and the difficulty of being able to produce, I mean, just a pair of earrings, how many pearls are needed to be harvested.
Yeah, wow. 10,000 pearls. And to talk a little bit about, you were talking about what you can and can't control, but Jewelmer obviously has sustainability at its core, which pearl is necessary for pearls. But talk a little bit about that when it comes to pearl farming and how you achieve that at Jewelmer.
Yeah, so over the years, we've come to realize that, as I said earlier, we control very little of the process. What we do control is we're able to choose a site, and that site being in the archipelago of Palawan, which, by the way, is the world's center for marine biodiversity and biodensity. So by nature of the place, it's extremely important for us to preserve this area in terms of a natural heritage for the world. So we can choose a nice site. We have to protect that site. And once that site is protected, then we have to make sure that the people are educated on how to sustain the beauty of the place, as well as the care for the oyster. And hopefully the reward for doing those things well is that we might harvest a pearl. So how do we do that? As I said earlier, as part of the protection, environmental conservation. So our group today, we protect about 100,000 acres of marine concessions in Palawan. So I think that's 7 times the size of where you live, Brecken, if you're on Manhattan.
Yeah.
So we protect an area 7 size of Manhattan, just to give an idea. And in terms of forest land, 37,000 acres. So of that marine coastline that needs to be protected from deforestation. If not, all that siltation and runoff will just come in and completely destroy the reefs. So we obviously have to also help the communities in finding sustainable livelihood methods especially those who are formerly engaged in illegal fishing, such as dynamite or cyanide fishing. So currently we have about 500 families in the rural coastal communities that are involved in these programs, such as virgin coconut oil processing, um, organic vegetable farming, and free-range chicken farming. So these are easy livelihood programs that they can then resell to the farms or the markets in the nearby communities.
Mm.
Then, of course, community development as well. So when we say community development, it's all encompassing. Um, that's the educational side. That's also health, water, nutrition. So there's a number of things, and I think just to summarize, the reason that we are engaged in these activities is because it kind of goes hand in hand with being able to harvest a gem quality pearl. The beauty of the pearl is inextricably linked to the beauty of the place and the beauty of the people. So by beauty, I mean, the happiness, I guess the joy. So in terms of things we control, this is one of them.
Mhm.
But on the environmental side, it's very difficult for us to control such a huge number of variables.
Right. So sustainability really goes hand in hand with the cultured pearl itself. I mean, it's
Absolutely.
vital. And you mentioned, you were talking about, what you can and can't control. And as you mentioned, also the health of the environment is so important when it's, what surrounds the oysters as they're forming. So have you noticed, in terms of what you can't control, things like climate and environmental issues affecting the farms in the Philippines lately?
Yes, definitely. I would say in the last 10 years, we've noticed, a huge change in the conditions that we've been experiencing. So just to give you an idea that one oyster filters about 16 gallons of water per day. So when we have close to about, several millions of oysters, you can imagine how much water is being filtered every day. So because they're filter feeders, they're very sensitive to things such as water temperature, dissolved oxygen in the water, as well as food availability. So what have we seen change? We've seen more extreme temperatures for sustained periods, whether that's colder temperatures or warmer temperatures. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit. I'm sorry. We can do
That's all right.
the conversion, but basically our oysters are comfortable between 27 to 31 degrees Celsius. For any longer period at 26 or 32, they start to weaken and they get very stressed. And they won't be making gold pearls, definitely. So temperature is a big factor that we've noticed changing. And with that temperature, ocean acidification. So ocean acidification means that the ocean is absorbing too much carbon and it cannot, process that carbon fast enough. And therefore, it's affecting the ability of calcium-based organisms to metabolize. So as you know, we are also calcium-based. Our bones are calcium, but so are so many marine organisms, whether that's coral, fish, shellfish. So this ocean acidification is actually making it harder for organisms like the oyster to not only reproduce, but to grow. And this also affects the dissolved oxygen, which I'm not sure if many are aware, but our oceans are the greatest producers of oxygen for our planet, even more than our forests. So the fact that the oxygen levels are dropping, it's really affecting many species. So what does this mean for us as farmers? It means lower survival rate, slower growth of the oysters, smaller pearls. So I would say, just to highlight how drastic the change has been, compared to 10 years ago, our production today is about 50% of what it was 10 years ago.
Wow. 10 years, only 10 years ago. Wow. Okay. And, I think a conversation that we've been having with everybody, right, is how COVID has affected various parts of the market. So what impact has it had on your pearl farming, if at all?
So on the pearl farming, it was more of a human impact. Why? Because so we work in in I guess remote communities,
Mhm.
and if they're watching the news saying there's this global pandemic and all of this bad stuff is happening around that's affecting their lives because not all of their families are on the islands. They didn't really feel it because of course the island is secure, there's nobody really going in or out, and
Right.
especially with the lockdowns, they weren't able to travel to their home provinces for their vacations and stuff, so they were pretty much stuck on the island for a year. So it was a big challenge from a human side in terms of managing anxiety, stress, um, and these other coastal communities around the farms, because the logistics had suffered so much,
Mhm.
were missing basic necessities such as rice. So we had to do a lot of rice delivery missions, for these communities. Fish, obviously, it was not a problem, but it was more of rice, which is a very important staple here. So yeah, I think it was more from the psychological aspect. Just to highlight that point, so there are schools in these remote areas that, because of a government law, were mandated to do classes, remote classes, even if they're on an isolated island with no outsiders coming. So the
Wow.
Department of Education enforced that, and obviously the reception is not great in that area. So they would go home, try to connect for a while, and then it wouldn't work, and then they just go back to the school playground and play, but they couldn't do the modules from their classroom. So that was a bit awkward because there was a lot of things like that.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. And then I wanted to take a look at sort of overall, your thoughts on how the cultured pearl market is today, the health of it.
So, well, as I showed earlier, the pearls, there aren't we're not harvesting more pearls basically. And today, I would say 99% of the pearls that you'll find on the market are cultured. I think the natural pearl market is relatively small compared to the cultured pearl market. This said, this pandemic has been quite challenging for a lot of farmers, because they had no way of distributing their goods or going to different trade shows or auctions in order to sell their products. We're very lucky from the perspective that we've had very long established relationships that we've developed trust over decades, since my father's time, and therefore we were able to continue to do business just with a phone call and just with that level of trust. But I can't say that was the case for everyone.
Mhm.
Now, as you can see here in the slide, we estimate that we produce roughly about 80% of the world's top quality golden South Sea pearls. And what we're finding today is, although for at least for the loose trade, it's still going through traders in Hong Kong and Japan. A large majority of it is ending up at the retail level in China. This said, we have noticed that for the very high quality, there has been an increase in demand and appreciation in very niche markets in the U.S., uh, particularly in places like Palm Beach, Jackson Hole, areas of high net worth individuals.
Mhm.
The demand for the very rare has gone up. However, of course, because it's very rare, it's few and far between.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much. I think maybe we're going to throw it over to Michelle in a second for audience Q&A. I know there's been plenty that's come in, but before we do, is there anything else about pearl farming or Jewelmer or anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I guess I just would like to share that, as a farmer, as a pearl farmer, it's really about working in harmony with nature. We
Mhm.
do many things, and we work towards, as I said, a level of perfection. Although sometimes it's barely ever achieved. But pearl farming brings, I guess, a lot of humility and teaches us a lot about life, and that no matter how much we think we control, we actually don't control much at all. And sometimes the best we can do is really all we got. So because there's this beautiful story, human and nature, behind this pearl, we feel that it carries with it such a unique energy as a gem. And for us, it's really a pleasure for my family to be able to share it with the likes of yourselves and of course the audience here today. So we're very grateful. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, we love having you here. It's so fascinating, I think, to sit here and hear directly from somebody. So we appreciate you being here and teaching us all more about pearls. I'm going to throw it over to Michelle for a few audience questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Jacques, Christophe, and Bracken. That was so interesting. And we have a lot of questions that came in beforehand and a couple more that came in during the presentation. And I want to give a quick thanks to our sponsor, RDI Diamonds. As a reminder, you can still type questions into the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. I'm going to give people a couple more minutes here to ask questions. And in the meantime, I just wanted to say a quick word about RDI Diamonds. RDI Diamonds, the selection you want, the quality you need. Thousands of diamonds, that's just the beginning. RDI offers a wide range of services and support to help you succeed. From flexible memo options and a partnership with De Beers Group Industry Services to generous stock options and cost-efficient shipping. RDI's goal is to provide the highest quality of both care and diamonds to your store. Visit rdidiamonds.com today to learn more. That is rdidiamonds.com. Now let's get started with our listener question. Jean-Christophe, I know that you talked a little bit about the effect of the pandemic on your workers, but somebody wrote in here and they want to know, were you able to nucleate golden South Sea pearls this year? And are there going to be any changes to future availability of goldens or larger sizes of goldens because of the pandemic?
That's a very good question, Michelle. Thank you. We were not able to nucleate as much as we would have wanted to, and that's primarily because of the limited movement of our pearl technicians. We could not move them around with the lockdown. You have to remember we're working across an area of about 300 miles. So it was very challenging from a logistics point of view. Now, in terms of obviously what we were seeding last year and this year is not for harvest, 2021. So I think the production will be reducing up until 2023. We're gonna try to bring it up this year, but that will only be felt in 2024. Basically, what we're gonna be harvesting until 2023 is already in the water. There's nothing we can do about that. So yeah, the production is gonna go down before it's gonna go up. And in terms of larger sizes, as I said in the presentation, we are getting smaller sizes. The average has gone down, and therefore the larger sizes in golden are going to be rare. So if you have some, hold on to them, and if you don't, good luck finding them.
I mean, and this is, of course, Jacques-Christophe, on top of what you mentioned earlier, which is the effect that climate change is having on the water temperatures and then thus your production as well.
Yes, exactly. So both of these factors coming together is not going to be very beneficial in terms of size and volume for the harvest.
Okay, thank you so much. People, we have a lot of questions too about kind of marketing cultured pearl to the consumer. It's kind of a two-part question. Do you see cultured South Sea pearls gaining more popularity among jewelry consumers in the future? And how do you market cultured pearls to clients who covet the perceived inherent value of natural pearls?
Okay, so I think there are two questions there. So firstly, I think that we've gone a long way in promoting cultured South Sea pearls, but I believe there's still a lot longer way to go. I want to commend the Cultured Pearls Association of America because they did this fantastic educational program called Pearls as One, which has been very good in spreading the education and the knowledge about the cultured South Sea pearl, actually all cultured pearls. Now, in terms, sorry, could you repeat the second question?
Second question was, how do you get consumers who are interested in natural pearls interested in cultured pearls?
So I think first of all, those are two very different markets. I think they both have their own individual spaces. We all know that the value of natural pearls are very different to the value of cultured pearls. However, um, to some extent, it is a similar material. It's still nacre. So if you have a high nacre thickness in cultured South Sea pearls, these can last, several generations, similar to natural pearls. So um, I think really it's in the story as well. If you're the person who would be going for a natural pearl is really, wants a, I guess, a piece of history, something that was found a long time ago. Today, they're not hard. I mean, they're not able to find as much natural pearls just because there's so many of the wild oyster beds that have been depleted, and therefore, um, I think cultured pearl also has its unique positioning and story because it is that, I guess, symbiotic relationship between man and nature to be able to produce this gem, that has all these sustainable qualities. So I think, yeah, I think it's two really different markets. Are they exclusive? I don't think so. I think somebody who buys cultured pearls can also buy a very rare natural pearl, and somebody who has a string of natural pearls can also buy cultured pearls. And we've seen that happen.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a couple questions here kind of about your process in other pearls. Somebody wants to know, are you cultivating golden pearls anywhere else? And which other countries are in the golden pearl game as well?
Okay, another very good question. So we have studied about producing in other places. However, we found that Palawan was really I guess, the penultimate place. I mean, the number one spot that we were able to achieve that color. Um, when we started, a lot of traders were not really for the Goldens because at that time the target was really white. It was really only about the early late 90s, early 2000s that golden pearls really started to hit the market in a commercial quantity, and probably late 2000s is when some other countries such as Indonesia and Myanmar started trying to produce this color. Although the color that's coming out from those countries is slightly different because we have about three generations of breeding ahead of them in terms of getting that very deep color. So in terms of other countries producing goldens, or at least trying to produce the golden, is Indonesia and Myanmar. Although I know that some of them now have made a switch to trying to produce white pearls again because of the difficulty and such a low yield of gold when you're trying to produce it.
Right, right, right. Someone else wanted to know along those same lines. Um, how has the massive production of cheap China, and this is not my question, this is from a listener, how has the massive production of cheap China freshwater pearls affected demand for your South Sea pearls?
Frankly speaking, for us, it has had zero impact. I think it's a very different product. I think it's a good. I mean, this could be controversial with other South Sea pearl farmers, but I think having the freshwater is a good entry level for people to get introduced to pearls, because the price point again is very different. The story is very different. It's not produced in the ocean, it's produced in ponds. And it's not one pearl per oyster. It's, 30, 60, 90 pearls per mussel. So has it affected the goldens? No. Maybe the whites a little bit, but I think what we're seeing now, the way the white pearls are, the price of the white pearls are strengthening. I can't say that it's affected it too much.
Okay. Thank you. Another listener says, hi, thanks for a great presentation. Does the nuclei come from the same type of oyster that it is being implanted in? And does the mantelpiece that's inserted form the actual pearl sac?
Okay, wow, these are great questions. So the nuclei actually comes from the heart of the USA, the Mississippi River. It comes from a Mississippi freshwater mussel, which is then machined into a round bead. So the material is still mother of pearl, but it's not from the same shell. For one reason or another, that's the material we found, which was the most biocompatible and which was the one that the oyster accepted the most. Also, once the pearl is formed, it's the material that has the least movement and therefore wouldn't cause any cracks in the nacre. Now, so the nucleus is inserted together with the live tissue. And what the live tissue does is it starts to disintegrate around the nucleus to then form the pearl sac, which lays the layer of calcium carbonate and aragonite crystals around the pearl.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Very interesting. And then we have other questions about people want to know a lot about quality. Someone asked, has the quality of Philippine pearls suffered due to oyster inbreeding in the same way the Japanese Akoya pearl has?
Interesting. Okay. So oyster inbreeding is a challenge because just like with any species, for example, horses, when you're trying to get a purebred or dogs, at some point the genetic variability starts to narrow and the what you call hybrid vigor or the strength of the organism goes down because it's been inbred too much. So we try to not go into that by introducing I guess new brood stock every time. However, yes, it is true. The more golden we are trying to achieve, for example, the smaller the pearl, so the less power the oyster has to produce nacre. And also, ironically, the more we're trying to produce golden, the less round pearls we have, the more ovals we have. So I don't know exactly what the correlation is there, but that's a statistical fact.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. And we have a couple questions here about pearl color and pearl luster. Someone wants to know, over time, does a pearl lose its luster? If so, how can it be restored?
Okay, so first, so the two characteristics, color and luster. Luster is one of the most difficult characteristics to, or the rarest characteristics to achieve. I mean, I'm talking about top quality luster. Top luster means that the oyster, which is a very simple organism, was able pretty much to lay the calcium carbonate like very organized bricks. So basically bricklaying. And if it's perfectly laid, that's when you have great luster. Just like kind of like with a diamond with the light refraction. So, but you have to remember, this is a living organism doing this. So between those layers of calcium carbonate, you have protein. Okay, so this protein can affect the luster negatively if the pearl has been, let's say, kept in a safe and the protein dries out or is in too much of a dry environment. This protein will be affected, and therefore the luster will be affected as well as the color, because the color is the protein. So how can it be restored? Okay, so we have to remember this is a living organism, so it's very similar to our skin. If once our skin is damaged, it's very difficult to restore our skin. So I think the best way is preventive. Preventive maintenance, just like for our bodies, it's a natural organism, so we have to take care of our skin, of ourselves, of our teeth. So yeah, pearls are very similar to, it's not very romantic, but I guess teeth. So we have to look after our teeth. Or you could put veneers on pearls, but it wouldn't look too good.
Well, what's the best way, Jacques-Christophe, what's the best way to care for your pearls? Like to store them? Should you polish them? Do you have any tips in that vein that the retailers can pass on to their customers? Hi.
Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Jacques-Christophe, I was just asking, you mentioned, it's like you have to take care of your teeth, you have to take care of your skin.
Yeah.
What's the best way to take care of your pearls to ensure they keep their luster as long as possible? Where should you store them? Temperature, any kind of like polishing you can do? Speaking of something easy that like customers can do at home once they buy a strand or a pair of studs.
Okay, so a good thing to do is to wipe down your pearls with not a wet, but kind of a damp cloth regularly. So that helps to keep the moisture in the pearls. Um, Temperature as well, but it can be as simple as wearing them regularly. They need that warmth. So pearls, they like to be worn. So don't just leave them in a safe for a long time. They like temperature and humidity. Remember where they're coming from. They're coming from a tropical environment. So they want that warmth and they want that humidity.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That makes sense. Um, Someone else asked, are South Sea pearls treated to improve color? I think we actually had a couple questions about color treatment. Are South Sea pearls treated to improve color, and are they polished for better luster and sheen?
Okay, so at the farmer's level, we don't do any sort of treatment for luster or for color. However, once we do sell them to the wholesale traders, there are some that put the pearls through a chemical process to enhance either the luster or the color. However, they should disclose these treatments if they do, just like with any other gem. So because the education in the market is not really out there, it's really best to know the provenance and the source of your pearls. That way, you can be guaranteed that it's natural color and natural luster. Always ask for natural color, natural luster, because if they have been treated, they're going to deteriorate much faster, obviously, because they've inserted chemicals in something that is a natural uh, gem. Yeah.
Okay. On the kind of color luster topic, what is the latest progress within the industry on unified pearl grading? This listener says, we use the GIA value system, but our buyers ask for simplification.
So I think the GIA grading system is pretty good. It's quite simple. I think so. In the diamonds, you have the five C's. So in pearls, um, okay, so you have size, you have color, you have shape, you have skin purity, and then you have luster. Those are really the main ones. And so yeah, again, color, size, shape, skin purity, which is the imperfections on the pearl, and luster. I
Much like clarity in a diamond, like inclusions and
ex-
whatnot.
yes, exactly. So I think that's really as basic as it can get. So now, when you're talking about color, it can be very subjective. Size is obviously a measurement, so that's very easy. Skin purity, again, once the pearls are set, it depends on how many imperfections you see. I think the GIA standard is fairly straightforward, and it was built on the model that we as pearl farmers use, because I remember GIA consulted us for their classification system.
And I think they also want to know, is there any kind of push for, I know this has come up with other colored stones as well, Brecken, for some kind of unified system instead of being, like this person calls it this person calls it this, but kind of a unified pearl grading system that all labs use. Or is this a dream?
Well, I think in terms of the larger pearl farmers, we've all pretty much come to an agreement. The real challenge there is there's so many different pearl types, so many different countries that are producing pearls. with diamonds, it was quite a centralized market and production and distribution, whereas pearls is very decentralized. So it's by nature of that, it's very hard. Everybody has their own idea of, oh no, this is chocolate, or this is brown, this is dark champagne, this is peacock. So they all have their own subjective terms, and I think it's part of the, I guess the marketing aspect of each country that produces pearls. But I think Sibjo, Sibjo came out with a pearl classification, and we're really pushing for, for that to be used globally. So I think if there's one to look out for, it's definitely the Sibjo Pearl Guide, and that has all the different kinds of pearl types as well as how they're classified.
Okay, that sounds interesting. On the still about grading, someone want to know specifically how reliable is the new GIA Pearl Identification Certificate? Is this certificate helpful in selling pearls? And Brecken, I believe we wrote about this.
Mhm.
Is it helpful in selling pearls? So, we, very frankly speaking, for the majority of our pearls, we haven't used them. However, I think if you have a retail store, and it will definitely help give your staff more confidence to talk about the pearls, because the fact of the matter is that the frontliner staff and retail stores in the US are not as educated about pearls as they are about diamonds. So naturally they will gravitate to diamonds because they're more confident about it. But if there's a certificate there that's answering all the questions the client might have about the pearl, then yes, I think that would be an effective tool for your staff to be able to sell pearls better. I think that gap is just the education, and that's our shortcoming as an industry, is we haven't been able to push that education and knowledge as much as the diamond industry has done a fantastic job of.
Yeah, I mean, I think the diamond industry benefits from one company was in control of the market for so long that they were really able to set the message, put the message, and with, as we see with other colored gemstones, the market's more fragmented, and that makes it more difficult.
Yes, you've hit the nail on the head with that one, Michelle.
Somebody wants to know, this is an interesting question. What do the oysters eat? And and what causes the pearl to turn golden in color? And I guess are those two things related?
Yes. Okay. So what does the oyster eat? This was a very, very important question we had to answer because there was no research about this. And in order to be able to breed the pearls, we had to know what to feed the babies once they were in the lab. So this was a question that took my father and his partner 10 years of research, trial and error.
Wow.
So I can't tell you the exact plankton that they eat, because then that's our secret sauce. That's kind of like the gravy. But I can tell you that there's about 50,000 different types of phytoplankton in the marine environment in the Philippines. And we narrowed it down that they only eat 7. So we had to we worked those out one by one. So they're very, very picky eaters. And by the way, phytoplankton is like it just grows by photosynthesis from the sun. So these are plants. So they're like extreme vegans basically, because they only eat 7 out of 50,000 different types of phytoplankton. And
So they're like cats, basically.
yes, and they eat them at different stages of their life. So it's not like they eat all the time. So it was very challenging to work that out. Now, in terms of its effects on the color, yes, because when there's less plankton, definitely the gold color does not materialize itself in the pearl. We have what we call light champagne pearls, when there are extended periods that the plankton is not available in the natural environment. So the more plankton, the healthier the oyster, the more power it has. Then that's when it really starts coating with gold nacre. So yeah, plankton equals energy, and then that energy is converted into gold, I guess. Yeah.
And this is why it suffers so much from climate change and water temperature changes, because it's a delicate balance. If they only want 7 kinds of plankton and something happens in the water where that amount of plankton's reduced, it throws off their diet, right?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So I just want to share a kind of, I guess, philosophical um, comparison of what the pearl is. So my dad always said it's the conversion of universal energy through an organism into this gem that will radiate or change your life, because it's basically essentially the sun's energy converting into gold. So it's kind of like alchemy.
Okay, very cool. We have someone that wants to know, and this is kind of an environmental question. How do you see the pearl industry progressing to match the challenges with progress as they manage the ripple effect of overfishing?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if that question means overfishing of oysters or overfishing in general. So I'm just gonna say that at least us here in the Philippines, we don't fish the oysters from the wild oyster beds. We breed our own oysters. Now, in terms of overfishing, we're lucky here in the Philippines that the government has some very comprehensive environmental laws, and the pearl farms are actually used as protectors against commercial fishing. So when a pearl farm is given a marine concession, there is no commercial fishing or trawling allowed in these areas. So as I said, we are managing about 100,000 acres. So that's 100,000 acres of reefs and area that marine life can flourish without having to worry about commercial fishing. So that's the net positive impact of pearl farming on the marine environment.
Okay. So we have time only here for 2 more questions. So we had 2 questions come in about Cashy pearls. Do you also produce Cashy pearls in the farm, and what percentage of your production do those pearls comprise?
Okay. So do you remember earlier in the conversation when we spoke about the nucleus being inserted and then the mantle tissue being inserted to then attach to the nucleus? So how a Cashy forms is, instead of the live tissue attaching to the nucleus, the oyster rejects the nucleus and keeps the live tissue. So then that disintegrates and then becomes a Cashy itself. So this is something that we don't control. We can't control. It's kind of like a surprise. So it's a very, very small part of our production. If it was a big part, it means we're doing a lot wrong. But yeah, it's always a nice surprise to see a Cashy. I think their shape and is so beautiful, and it's so unique.
And do you have any idea what percentage of your production turns out to be? I know you can't control it, but do you have any idea what percentage of your production turns out to be Cashy pearls?
It's got to be less than 1%.
Wow. Okay. Okay, so this is going to be the last question. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everyone today, but you talked a lot about Jewelmer's sustainability efforts. Someone wants to know, what are the biggest obstacles to your sustainability efforts today?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, well, aside from what's happening around the world, at the local level, it's also challenging because obviously population is increasing, um, tourism is becoming more and more developed and reaching further areas that were before completely remote and nobody was going there. So I think development in that sense, in terms of tourism, in terms of increase in population and increased need for resources, is kind of encroaching into the areas of the farms. So that's a challenge. And then globally, yeah, I guess acidification would be our biggest threat. Ocean acidification. So the absorption, our ocean's absorption of carbon dioxide, as well as microplastics, That's a very, very scary and big challenge for us. So at the foundation, we always, as part of our early childhood environmental programs, we always try to teach the students about proper segregation of waste, proper disposal of plastics, and try to reduce the use of plastics. These kind of discussions.
Well, I think that's a good practice for everyone to adopt. Jacques Christophe, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much for taking all those questions. It was so interesting. And Brecken, thank you for hosting. My next question will return again next Tuesday. That's going to be May 25th at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be hosted by our Associate Editor News, Lenore Fido, and she's going to be interviewing Mindy Perry, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Kendra Scott. So this should be a great discussion. They're going to be talking about driving customer engagement, both online and off. You can sign up to attend that webinar on our webpage. I just dropped that link into the chat. Thanks again to our guests and to our host for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a great day.